Hi there. This recording did not save the intro for some reason, so quick intro in case you've never watched one of these Q&As before. So this is all around Keeper, and we're going to start by doing a deep dive into a topic to kind of get the ball rolling, help understand a different feature in case you haven't come across it before. Then we'll roll into questions as they come up from live people in the chat. Today's feature is about metrics, and Tyler Otto has some amazing deep dives into it, both on Catch Up with Keeper and on his own personal YouTube videos. So I'm going to link those down in the description of this video in case you want to dive deeper down the rabbit hole. But we're just going to do a quick intro to help get your bearings in case this is a new one for you. So now onto the recording.
And adding like a little bit of an extra visual, I found helped to enhance the report at least. So I'm going to show you that first, and then we can come back here to the variable page, and I'll go into a little bit more about what else you can do in here. So if you're just starting out, this is a great place to go. Again, this is all the default that comes on your financial statements. Click on visuals and then come up to add a new visual.
And Jody, just to make sure, this is client by client, right?
Correct.
Let's make sure we're doing that. Okay, so we hopped into there pretty quickly. So this is on an individual client on that metrics tab. All of our tasks are on the close tab, and most of us are familiar with that reporting tab. That's the third one over. This is the second one called metrics. So just in case anybody's just hopping on and is in the middle of like where we're at.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to give your visual a title. If you want to, you can add a description here. You have some options on whether it's by dollar value or numbers or percentages. You can also decide your rounding if you want it to be whole numbers or show rounding. Here's where you can pick your visual type. So there's a lot of different options here. To start, I'm going to choose the area chart because that's one of my favorites. And I've put in here that we're just going to show them basic income and expenses. So if I look for my variable, I can find it here, profit and loss. This is just saying that this variable is on the profit and loss tab. So that statement, and I'm choosing the income account. I can pick a color. And then you can decide whether up is good or bad. So whether the number is going up is a good thing, or if it's a bad thing. So for income, it's a good thing. So I'm going to leave it there. And then I'm also going to add in my expenses. And you can see that once I add it, that chart starts to fill in. So again, this is on my profit and loss. I'm choosing the overall expenses. I don't like red, so I'm just going to make it purple. And for this one, if my expenses are going up, it's kind of a bad thing. So I'm going to select that and click save. This is a very basic visual that you can add to your reporting. That just gives your client something to look at other than just the plain numbers. And it clearly shows, okay, here's my income and here's my expenses and how they correlate. So I'm going to click save. Now that I have a visual saved, I can add this to my reporting. And again, we'll back up and go back through a little bit slower, but I just want to show you like how things go all the way through. So here, the last page right now is your metrics page. And once you've added a visual there or a KPI card, which I'll show you in a second, they'll show up here on this last page. There are requests out there for the ability to rearrange the whole reporting. I know a lot of people would rather have the metrics behind the executive summary before you go into all the details. So that canny request is out there, but we're waiting for that to change, to have more flexibility here. That was a super quick intro to the details here. Coming back over to metrics. And Erica, stop me if we've got any questions so far, or if I'm going too fast, just jump in.
Yeah, you're good. Rock along. I'll probably ask some dumb questions in case anybody's wondering here in just a second. So feel free to roll through, and then I'll ask the dumb questions so nobody has to.
Thanks. Okay, so back over here to your variables page. So this is where those visuals, this is where it's pulling from. You can create custom ones if you want. So come down here and click the plus tab, and then you can name it as a custom, or you can have additional reports. So for example, if you have classes, you could choose a profit and loss and select class. And maybe you're doing it by project. Nope, I don't want to selected. So you can set that up and then it would pull in that data. And my demo account isn't fully built out to have a lot of data in here right now, but that gives you a quick look as to how you can add some extra ones. Now, earlier I added a custom tab and I named it KPIs. So if I was just looking for some basic information, and I also added in a formula. So when it's custom, it'll come up as blank. To add a new line of data, you would come up here and click insert row. You have options of adding just a plain number, which is here. And this is where you would actually click in and manually input numbers. Or you can add a formula, which is what I've done up here. And I'll show you that in a second. You can also add dividers. So if you want to have some data here and then a space and then extra data coming down, you can do that as well. When you're adding a formula, you don't put an equal sign in or anything like that. The example I was going to give is maybe a labor margin here. And I did the profit before where it's profit divided by the income. That's that formula for this one. But for labor margin, oh, no, I put the name in the wrong place. So labor margin would go here. This is where I'm pulling my variables. So I have my contract labor. And as I start searching for the one that I want, you'll see the different tabs here: profit and loss, balance sheet, cash flow. If you have additional ones, you would have those down there as well. The reason profit and loss class project isn't showing up is because it doesn't have a account with this name. So I'll take my contract labor, add a space, add my calculation there. So I'm doing divided by, and I'm going to do income. So again, I'm just going to start looking for that. And I want to take it off my primary profit and loss statement here. That is the complete formula for the one that I'm pulling. I'll click apply, and I'll start getting numbers. Always click save. So this is one of the few spaces in Keeper where you are going to have to hit save in order for things to be captured. In a lot of other places, there's auto save. Metrics is not one of them. So whenever you're working in metrics, whether it's adding custom values here or in your visuals, always click on save. So now we can come in here and oh, sorry, hold on a second. I wanted to show you guys real quick a KPI card. So I first showed you the charts here where you're comparing values or showing it over a period of time like this. And there's different ways that you can do that: bar charts, basic line. Oh, the donut chart's not coming through very well, or the pie chart for the data that I have in here. And you'll see here that it's multiple variables or just singles. So I'm going to cancel out of this and show you a single KPI card. Single variable, so like the information that I had pulled earlier. So maybe I do profit margin. Then I come over here to my variables and find the one that I just created. And you'll see at the top here, it shows that custom tab first. So the ones that you've already created, you don't have to hunt through. They're right here at the top. And I can click that and hit save. Like I said, I don't have as much data in here right now, but it just gives you the card and then would give you the value right there. If I go back a couple of months, I might be able to get it where I was earlier. Let this refresh. Okay, now you can see in our demo account, things pick up in November of 22. If I come here to December, I bet we'll have even more data. And at the top, there's my KPI card that just shows my profit margin right now. Then on my reporting tab, I should have both of those on my metrics page. clicking faster than Keeper wants me to go. So your metric page will match that visuals section. One additional thing I want to highlight real quick is executive summary. You can have key metrics and you can add in those variables that you've pulled out. And you can show whether it's a percentage, of course, the rounding, save, close, close. I've got to turn that on to be able to see it. And now I've added that to my key metrics down here. To me, this feels like it's a lot as far as an intro, so I'm going to stop here. This is definitely a rabbit hole that you can go down to and a huge area where you can just play. It's a big playground. I would be careful with how deep you go in for your clients without charging them for that. This is definitely a higher level service, so keep that in mind. But again, this scratches the surface right now. We are going to give you a lot of resources that we've gathered. A lot of them are from Tyler Otto. He seems to be the king of metrics right now. So we'll share all of those resources with you as well.
Yeah, so let's back up just a hair and talk about a couple of these because this is really interesting, Jody. So some of these will have just an individual, and some you may need to add a specific variable,
Yes.
right? And create that so that you can pull it, which I think is really interesting to just kind of denote and keep track of. Again, this is client by client. So I think that's also really important. And that's actually a good thing, right? Not every client, well, unless we're very niched, often we have different clients who will want different pieces of data on there, right? And depending on where they're at in their business, they may want to see more granularly or more overarching. So I think this is really interesting to just kind of understand some of these pieces that we can play with to help really bridge the gap. Because I think one of the most tricky things when I was coming in without the bookkeeping side was that profit and loss is kind of intimidating to look at sometimes. So this is a way that we can add a little bit of visual on those high lever, those metrics or those pieces that are going to be really important to that client. And sometimes that visual can help make it to where it's a little bit easier to even get into some of those deeper numbers because now we're not just staring at the profit and loss. We have a little bit of context with that. So I think that's really, really awesome. Thank you for showing some of that, Jody. I really appreciate it.
The reason that I've come in here to our close page and brought up the profit and loss statement here and showed you the full year is because this is a great way to have a holistic look at your clients' books and say, okay, where on this page can I highlight more information for them? Or where is something that I need to go in deeper with them to say, hey, these numbers changed a lot over this period of time. Here's a visual that shows, in a graph what that looks like. It's going to grab their attention. And that's a great place to add value and to give some advisory services there as well, is to be able to go through the profit and loss and say, hey, I think this line item would be great to highlight to them. And then you can use that data to be able to create the visuals for your clients.
Exactly. And I think one thing to mention, you kind of scratched this a little bit, that this is higher level advisory, right?
Yes.
I think a couple of ways that you might integrate this, especially if you're only doing like a couple clients, maybe you're pretty maxed out. I mean, it's February. Most of us are a little bit tapped out on capacity. But if we add in a visual that adds a little bit of context, maybe that income and expenses, something that's super easy, super simple. Or if we have somebody that maybe we're doing that quarterly loom to kind of go over some of those reports, maybe that's where you integrate some of those metrics and you show that in part of your loom as you're walking through. This could also set the foundation for your actual advisory or coaching call, if that's the level of service that you're providing them. But I just wanted to show kind of some easy examples for how you might tier that. Because this is extra. This is beyond just making sure everything's compliant, and it can really benefit, but make sure, especially as we're going down that rabbit hole, that we're being mindful about the amount of value that's in this and not spending too much of our time without getting compensated in some way or really being specific about what we're pulling out for this client, because this is the stuff that bridges that gap that we often end up fill between compliance and actually helping them understand some of these numbers. So just take that all in context as well.
Yeah. Sorry, while you're talking, I was just showing
No,
some
please.
more options that people could do to throw in here. Right now, I'm just creating one that shows the different types of services that this company happens to offer. Oh, that's by class. Oh, never mind. This one was set up differently. But yeah, there's, like I said, it's a playground. You can definitely go down a rabbit hole and create all sorts of things. But hopefully this gives you guys a good intro to maybe add a few little things to make your reports a little bit more enhanced.
Yeah, Jody, I do have one question
Yeah.
before we kind of roll on. Feel free to pop any questions if you want to like go one step deeper or back up a hair on this. I've thrown some further articles if you do want to go down the rabbit hole and you want to kind of chase those breadcrumbs, but feel free to pop some questions in there if you have kind of a baseline for what we've shown. But Jody, while everybody's kind of getting settled with what, any questions or where we want to go next, I wanted to
Mhm.
kind of ask you, especially because this is client by client, maybe this is a dumb question, but is this an area of Keeper that we can create a template for? Or because everybody's COA is set up differently, it may not be able to. Can you kind of give us a 10,000-foot view of that
Yes.
question?
So this is a great question. So from a firm level, you can come into templates and you have, project templates, close templates, emails, text, questions, all that. You also have a reportings tab. Within here, metrics is on here, but there's not much that you can add to save. So it says no additional settings available for metrics. So right now, this is not something that you can put into your template. You can have the page here as a default, or you can remove the page as the default for your template. But what fills in on that metrics page is going to be client by client. Exactly like what you said, Erica. Each chart of accounts could be different. The various variables that you have in there, or formulas, or the different types of metrics that you might show for one client, you may not show for the other. So that will not be saved in there. But the good news is that once you have it set up for one client, you don't have to reset it up every month. It stays there until you adjust it.
Lovely. Thanks for diving into that.
Yeah.
And I know that, again, lots of rabbit holes here. So feel
Mm-hmm.
free to pop any questions. Let's shift gears just slightly, if you're okay with that, Jody, and start
Yeah.
answering a couple that popped into the chat. So Deb had a really great question about how to use emojis within some of the actual tasks. So can you pop open just a task that may have some emojis so we have a
Yeah.
visual for how this might help? But Deb, to answer your question, honestly, I just go to Emojipedia, like Wikipedia, but emoji, emojipedia.com, and then you can type in whatever emoji you want. So we specifically, she's mentioning, we set up a 1099 template for them, and we had emojis for the 1099 to help pull that out and make it a little bit easier to scan at a glance. So Deb, I would go to emojipedia.com and type in one or whatever number you need, and then just select that, and it should be able to copy paste for you into any task.
The way that I am currently doing it is
Oh
I
yeah,
hit
please.
the Windows button on my keyboard and the period at the same time. And that brings up this little window. And that's how I can add them as quickly as I do as I'm
Oh,
typing up and
lovely.
building out things. So I can search for it here. But again, it's my Windows key plus period
I
and
missed that.
same time.
Can you do that one more time? Because I missed how you did the windows. So you
So
showed
on my keyboard,
keyboard.
I click
Okay.
my Windows button, which is
Yep.
between my control
Yep. I see.
and
Yep.
alt, and the period button at the same
And the
time.
period at the same time. Okay, cool. Thank
And
you.
this pops up. And honestly, it does this in any application that I'm in.
Okay, cool.
um, all of them.
Yes, a little shortcut there. I love that.
Yes, that way, like as I'm typing, I just hit that real quick. I can add the emoji I want and keep going. And I know that I think it might be like the Apple key and period might be the same thing. There's different shortcuts for Macs, I believe, but there is one for this, I'm sure. But that's how I added the 1099 to make that kind of stand out in the task list that we created.
Once you pop open the window, how did you actually get the right emoji that you wanted?
So right here's a search feature. So I just typed in 1, grabbed my 1, 0, grab my 0. Or if it's something really important and I want to star it, I'll type in star. If it's something where I'm like, oh, we need to make sure people are warned about this or cautioned, I'll pull up that emoji. I'll do flags a lot of times to draw attention to things. Those are my primary go-tos, I think. Or if I have resource videos, I'll do like a movie icon to be like, okay, that's what I'm looking for here. In our templates, for anybody that has those, we'll put in there a calendar and say, set this task to recur at your preference. So it's just like a little, hey, here's a reminder to do this before you save and continue on with your client setup.
For some
Jody, go ahead, Deb.
So for some reason, the window, the emoji doesn't pull up the exact same window that you do. I'm not sure.
It may be different for different.
Oh, you're in Windows 11.
That could be.
I mean,
there may be a little bit of playing around. So you can also.
So can you put the website in the chat, because emoji is my brain is not wanting to spell.
Yeah, no, you're good. There we go.
Thank you. I was like, how in the world do I spell that?
It's a weird one for sure. Unless you've seen it and it sticks, it can be like, is that a G or a J or what am I doing?
I was like, all right, well, I'm an accountant. I have a reason that I can't spell.
That's amazing. And honestly, this kind of cracks the can open on a different tiny rabbit hole. Jody, can you open up the clear the bank feed for this one? I want to share a little bit of visual for how you might be able to use emojis in here. Because one of the difficult things with setting up SOPs or instructions on these tasks is that it can easily become like a block of text. And that can feel a little bit overwhelming to get our brain into or to scan. So I wanted to give a little bit of a where you might kind of use these, because we mentioned in the task description in your template to remind you, hey, I need to set the due date on this. Or here to break up some text. Kate also had a really, Kate had a really good example that she uses this on the actual portal dashboard as well. So that's another great use here. But I think this can easily get missed because emojis aren't technically part of Keeper or like a function that you can choose within the text box, but you can add them. So wanted to kind of just stop while we're there.
Yeah, I've used that all over my resources and we've used it on the dashboard as well. Again, it just kind of adds a little character to what you're reading. It can help draw the eye to where you want instead of it all just blending together. Plus, it just makes work more fun, right?
Love
that.
It's
wonderful. Thank you. It was funny because I'm like, there's an art to doing this, which is wonderful. So, but I wanted to mimic what we did for the 1099s for the others, and I just didn't know how to
get some consistency.
Exactly. I was like, how do I do that? I'm like, that's so lovely.
Stop the bus. Wait, how do we do this? No, that's a beautiful question. Everybody else, feel free to continue popping questions into the chat. We'll kind of filter through. Deb, let's kind of crack and start to brainstorm. Jody, how can we clean up old tasks? I know that this is something that a lot of us run into if we've used Keeper before and gotten really excited, and maybe we haven't had the habit of checking things off, or we set it up and now we have a bunch of old tasks. So let's walk through how to kind of clean some of this up so that our task list isn't 500 pages. That's a little bit overwhelming.
Okay, so tasks specifically, not reports right now. Okay.
Yes, old tasks, in case I said the wrong thing.
Old tasks. Apologies. No, I was about to go into reports. I was like, nope, she said tasks. Okay, so to clean up a lot of old tasks, I highly recommend going to the task list, because we
Mhm.
Anybody who's familiar with Keeper knows that this list takes everything from everywhere and compiles it into one. So it can be extremely overwhelming with the number of tasks that are in here, but it can also really come handy. Excuse me, come in handy. When you are cleaning up, I would recommend coming here and then filtering. So if it's one specific client, you can just choose that client or that group of clients to show up. If it's all clients, well, you can do any kind of combination of these, but if it's based on the close, like, okay, you know what? 2022 is long gone. I don't want any tasks to still be showing for this. So you can check off each one of these. I don't know if we have any in here. But you can check off like anything that's older. I want to get rid of it. That would be the only thing that you see. And you can bulk delete. So let me find some that we can do. We'll highlight some 2023. Here we go. So if I want to get rid of all of these from 2023 that are done, there's two ways of doing this. If it's something that you're like, you know, I don't want to delete them, I just want to mark them as complete, I can highlight all of them using the bulk action feature over here. I can set the status to mark them as done, and that way they're cleared off of this list. But if it's something where I'm like, you know what, I want to delete these all together, you can also bulk delete by clicking here. So if you've, a good example of that would be if you've added in a template, so every client has a certain task in there, but then that task is outdated and you no longer need it, and you want to delete it from every client without having to go into every client to delete that one, then you can also sort by task. So if you know how that task starts, you can find that, or, you know, go into the section and then search for it. But you can also find that specific task name and then do the same thing. Select each of them and bulk delete. If you just want to delete one at a time, you can do that from the menu over here.
Wonderful. And Jody, so that helps with how do we like check off tasks, right? And how do we delete them if we need to? What if we need them out of our hair, but we need to kind of save them into like an archived status or something like that that we can go back to? We're not quite ready to check them off, but we just need them in a spot where we can intentionally go back and review them when we're in a slower season or we have more capacity.
So for that, I would highly recommend creating a specific status for that. So let's see, you right now, these are all the statuses that we have in here. Maybe you're putting it on the back burner. So you would want to select that status. Again, you would click on the ones that you want to change, or just come right here and change it. You can do that on individual ones as well. But if you select both of them, then you can come down here and find that back burner or that archive or that on hold, or when there's time, like whatever status you decide, you can do that. Select that and then save. Those will all update. And then if you don't want to see them on a regular basis, sort them or filter them out and save a view. So that way, when you come in here, you're only seeing what's relevant for right now, or you can come back through. You can also do the same thing if you don't want to create a special status. You could just create a saved view. So if I come here and I want to save this view as when time allows, then I have that view saved. So when I'm ready to come back to these, I can just click on that save view and come here to work on them.
Keeper can help
those would be
filter
two
out
options.
what I actually see.
Yes.
Exactly.
Otherwise, on a regular basis, well, look, I used emojis here too. My to-do list, you know, so if this is what I want to do today, but then I've got time, I'll come back down to my other one.
Beautiful.
Two ways to do that.
Lovely. Let's fill in a gap that we accidentally left. So how do we create a custom status? Can you walk us through that? Because that's a firm-wide setting that we'd want to do.
Yes.
But in order to change it to that status, we do need to back up and figure out how to create a status. So let's go through that really
Absolutely.
quickly.
So, okay, up here in your practice settings, the wheel at the top, which is available on any page that you're on, you come here. You're going to come to the tasks. So the default ones of practice and statements, come over to tasks. All the way down at the bottom is where you have your task status options. Click on that and you can open it up. And again, you can use emojis. So here you can remove them. You can also change the order if you have something that you want to be higher up on the order when you do the drop down. It'll show that. So there's where you can add them or remove them.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Let's create a little bit of space here too. So these are statuses for each task, right? So this is
Yes.
how we can say this is a back burner project. We can say, hey, this is waiting on the client to finish the statement pull, those kind of pieces. So this is task level. We also have closed statuses, and that's what you're going to see on kind of that main dashboard, the homepage, the client list, however you would like to talk about it. That's another area that we can create custom statuses in, but just wanted to make sure that we're being super clear there that this is on the task status is for that individual task. The close status is the client or this close as a whole. Where are we at with that? So just want to make sure that was clear for anybody who's a little bit newer.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Awesome. Feel free to pop questions if we have them around like closed statuses. I'm happy to go into that if we want to kind of dig into that. But Jody, we have a question about ooh, goodness. So how do you differ from general and recurring tasks versus a process task? It's a really great question. I want to make sure we actually like completely understand kind of the background. Are you able to unmute yourself and kind of explain what your real question is? I want to make sure.
I'm looking for where that question was. Can you reread it again?
Oh, your mic's not working. Okay, cool.
Oh.
So how do you differ from general and recurring task versus a process task? Are you, let's define a little bit. So are you talking about like that general section in the at the very top that's like the non-closing section? Is that what you're asking about? Like how do we create? Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Yes, in the general section. Okay. So we'll dive into that. Let us know if we have tiny other questions as we're going through this. Happy to help.
Yeah. Okay, so before we kind of dive into that, I want to highlight the different sections we have here because that also plays a role in this. So client details is something that you can turn on in your practice settings if you want to have notes at the top here. Some people use this for best practices or key things that people want to know every time they come into the client. The next one is our non-closing tasks. And then the bottom is the close. So this is specific to the month that we're closing.
So you're just waiting for the price?
So this is specific to the month that we're closing. All of the tasks that are listed in any of these sections will recur every single month. So they will always be there unless you delete them. Once you delete them, they are gone from then on. So whatever's in here will repeat the next close. Your non-closing task section is where you can really play around with one-off tasks, tasks that reoccur more or less frequently than monthly. You can do a wide variety of things here. So we've renamed our general section to miscellaneous tasks. And we have some custom ones made that we've got hidden right now, just as some examples like quarterly tasks, year-end tasks, that kind of thing. How you break this section up is completely up to you. If you want to have a general section that is just catch-all and you use the tags up here to denote differences, you can do that. Again, it's a big playground here. How to know when to put it into which area. When it comes to your different sections within the non-closing task area, that's going to be personal preference, whether you want it to all be together or if you want something split out. how to kind of gauge or think about whether you want the task to be in your non-closing task section or the close section comes down to most often the frequency in which it happens, or if it is something that you're bringing out separately and you just happen to have the section up here. So if it's a one-off task, you'll want to have it in one of these. If it's a recurring task, you can set that recurring date to be whatever you'd like it to be in any of these frequencies here. I'm hoping I'm answering your question.
Yeah, let us know if that's not. Let me add a little bit more context here too.
Yes.
So one of the ways that somebody explained it to me is think about your pretty typical bookkeeping close. Now this has an asterisk on it. You can be more flexible than this. There's more creativity, but at a big level, if it's going to happen as part of your bookkeeping close, any part of the review, any financial statements that are going out regularly, put that in the close. You can create different sections. You can organize them however you want so it makes sense to you and your team. But anything else that happens once, that happens bi-weekly, that happens at the year end, anything else, we're going to use that non-closing section up at the top to break it out because it's not associated with the close. Right. So really great examples, one-off things like onboarding. We only do those once and it's not part of our close. So we're going to pop that out. Payroll happens more frequently than monthly and is not really attached to those. They're two different things. So that might be an area that we pop into non-closing or 1099 or a year end. Now, one interesting piece to kind of paint the picture the other way is if you're pulling statements that you need for the close or you need to do journal entries or anything like that, I would pop that into the close section. We call it client specific tasks. There's a lot that call it pre-close. That's totally an option there, but just wanted to give some task examples that may help kind of figure out which section those go into. Jody, one that we may not have answered is, can we go into just miscellaneous tasks, hit add a task, and talk about the difference between setting one date or setting a recurring date? I just want to make sure that that's like super clear on the difference there.
So in all of the sections here within the non-closing task area, you've got 3 tabs. Due soon means it's going to be due within the next 7 days or does not have a date at all. Due later, anything that's past 7 days, or completed. So if you've added a new task and you leave this date blank, it's going to sit here on the due soon tab until you mark it off. Once you check it off, it'll pop over here to the completed area. If you add a single date, same thing. It'll sit here or, it'll populate on here once it's due soon. Once you check it off, that task will then move to the completed tab and be gone. If you have it set to recur, and I'm going to back it up here and have this repeat weekly for an example.
Yeah, so let's actually slow that down just a hair if we can.
Yeah.
So I realized that your computer like glitched, at least on my side. So I want to make sure that that's clear. So we can choose a single date. Underneath that, there's a purple, blue, blurple, however you want to title that color, actual button that's called repeat. We can click that. And then from there, we can choose our frequency, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly. And if we need to do something that's outside of that drop down, like bi-weekly, then we would just select the closest one, so weekly, and then adjust to say every 2 weeks or if you have a different frequency. So just wanted to make sure we went through all of those clicks because I know that can go fast and then it's hard to do on your own.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
and before you can save it, you have to have a start date. If it's like I chose my start date because I wanted it to be in the past, it's only going to let you do a start date from this window from today onward. But for this example, I chose a previous date because I wanted to show you what happens when you check this one off. So I'm coming back in here. I've completed that task for the 9th, but I have it set weekly. It's going to repopulate. So now my due date is the 12th. Now I finished the 12th. I'm going to check that one off. Okay, now it's due on the 19th. And if I check that one off, it'll populate the next one for the 26th.
So now we're on track. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, you did have another question about how to use the subtasks. So this
Yeah.
is a really interesting piece to understand because I know every task management system works a little bit differently in how you can assign tasks. So within Keeper, the way that we can assign is on the task level, not the subtask level. So
Right.
this is just something to keep in mind that if like for that payroll or something like that, in that checklist, I can't say Jody's going to do step 1, I'm going to do step 2, then Jody's going to do step 3. We just can do that on the task level. So this is going to help determine the way that you organize your tasks because each of those that's going to be assigned differently needs to have a separate task.
Yes. Same thing with due dates. You only have one due date. So one due date, one assignee, one status. All of this is one for the whole thing. I like to think about the checklist down here, subtasks or how-to tasks, or items is another way that people have identified these. And it's just kind of a checklist. If you check all of them off, this will automatically be marked as done. But you're absolutely right that with them, only one assignee, only one due date.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody. Let us know if there's other questions that we didn't address there. Let's actually pop back up. I forgot a question from Deb, so let's circle back around and make sure that gets answered. Let's talk about the different type of users. Like what our options are there, and at least high level, what those really key differences between the 2 levels are, or 3 levels actually.
I'm gonna come here to manage users. Okay, so we have super admin, admin, which I can make him an admin, save, and standard. At this point in time, there's not a whole lot different between super admin and admin. I think the primary thing is coming back through and making them a standard user. So changing your roles is pretty much the primary difference right now between super admin and admin. The bigger differences are between standard and admin here. So a standard user is going to have a limited view. The view that you're seeing right now is an admin view. Standard users do not have access to the templates. They cannot add another client. And the time tracking that they have is very limited. Within time tracking, they do not have access to client reporting or employee reporting. All they can see is a list of their timers. That's like a real quick one there of accessibility. Also with your settings, that's available to your admin users only. Your standard users will not have access to this window here. You can lock certain features for your standard users. So if I were to turn this on, oh, I knew it was going to do that. But it shows you, it locks them. They're not able to, sorry, excuse me. Hold on. So locking that task. So if you are in here and you lock standard users, you're limiting what they're able to do. They will not be able to add new sections, delete or reorder them, delete tasks, or edit the details. They will be able to change the status, mark them complete, and they can create new tasks. I'm trying to think of anything else. Locking here, this, since we're already here, locking this, that would be for everybody, admin and standard, everybody. So if you're like, I don't even want this to be an option right now because I'm done customizing my setup, you can lock that so that it's a kind of like a stopping piece there. I believe those are like the primary differences right now. I believe they have some things in the works. I don't know where in the roadmap. I know they're doing a lot of work on templates right now. I don't know where in the roadmap to kind of expand that the user roles and make it more customizable.
Yeah, beautiful. So at a glance, it seems like biggest kind of differences there outside of like locking is really the ability to adjust those firm wide settings. The wheel
Mhm.
icon won't even be there. And then we
Correct.
won't have templates and we'll have an adjusted time tracking
Mhm.
on what we're able to do there. So there's some finer details in there, but wanted to
Mhm.
make sure that that was like super clear now that we backed up.
Could you
Yes.
Beautiful.
talk about that whole area has some really cool settings in there that I don't understand. So if you could go back to that same window, yeah,
This setting?
yeah, in there. So some of the stuff in there, I was like, oh, what is some of this?
Yeah. So we just talked about
Yep, those
locking.
ones. Yep.
Close assignee roles. So the defaults are preparer, reviewer, and manager. But if your firm uses different titles or different roles, you
Oh,
can change those. What you would do is default would look like this.
oh,
This is if you want to turn them on or not.
yeah.
Do you even want them available or visible? If you say yes, you want those on, you want to change the names of them, you just toggle that on. You can
Nice.
add in a thing. So like right now we've got this as bookkeeper, quality control, customer services, and then save it and it will change it.
Wow.
One thing
And
to keep in
3 is the
mind when you
max,
do
right?
that,
Okay.
when you do this, in a lot of places, it's just the first letter. So
Ah,
just keep that in mind. If everything starts with the same letter, it'll get confusing. Um, you could do primary, you could do 1, 2, 3. I mean, you can basically make it anything that you want for your firm and just save it.
great.
If you want to go back to prepare, reviewer, manager, you just retype that in here and click save labels.
Gotcha. Excellent. That's awesome.
Close settings here, auto complete close. So this toggles when if you have this toggled on, that means that when every task on your close is complete, it'll automatically mark that as done.
That's good.
If you want the close due date to show up on your client list, your dashboard there, you can toggle that on here or turn it off. If you want the close status to be enabled or not, you can as well. So you could have it to where you don't even have a status if you don't want that enabled.
Oh, gotcha.
There's also shortened task description. So I'm going to toggle this on and then go back to our client. So now this one shows ... I have to click it to see the full text.
Mhm.
Whereas when it's not on, that full text shows. If I turn this back off, now it will show me the whole thing.
Gotcha.
So if you only have a couple of lines, it's not so bad to have it off and be able to see it. But if you have a lot of stuff in your description, you may not want it that all to be visible because it can get visually overwhelming.
Especially if you're using any sort of links or Loom videos
Yes.
or anything like that in your description, that's where I see this being the most helpful
Yes.
because that hyperlink will still work, but we don't need to see the entire thing taking up half the close page. So that might be one area that you kind of play around with these descriptions too.
So the
Yep.
close due date just means it shows on the front page of the,
Yes.
right? So that's where it shows. So the
Yep,
close.
I will show you.
Yeah, it's in here on this page as well. But the main is
Oh,
on that
yes, on
kind
the
of
top.
client list. Mhm.
So it would be in here, and you would have the option to toggle it on or off, but I don't have it in here. So if I turn it on, now it shows up here.
Ah, there we go. Okay, good. Okay, good. Thank you.
And then I should
Absolutely.
also be able to hide it too. In there somewhere.
Gotcha. Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you. When I went in, yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jody, we've got one other question that's popping up that I think is a really good one to dive into with our last couple of minutes.
Okay.
Let's put a quick disclaimer. If anybody does need to hop off on another call, I'll send over any resources that we've talked about, anything to kind of dive deeper, and the recording over in an email. But in the meantime, so talking about closed statuses, some of us are using like slightly different processes like payroll, or if we're doing tax or anything like that, can we talk through some workarounds? Because there's not the ability to have two closed status options, but how can we kind of work around that and play around with some other options there?
Yes, great question. If that's the case, my recommendation would be use the custom close status here as maybe your primary for your bookkeeping. If that's the primary thing that you're doing is bookkeeping, make this the closed status for that. If the primary thing that you're doing is tax, then maybe you switch it. But let's use the example of bookkeeping is the primary. We add on some tax services, we add on payroll services, and we need custom statuses for those as well. So I would use this closed status as my bookkeeping status. From here, I would utilize our custom properties, which is found under all client settings, and then properties here. You can also access this from the client page as well. This will just give you the overview of everybody, all your clients at once. So in here, I could add in payroll, or here's the example of payroll status. I'm working on it. We created this one as a drop down, so it's similar to our bookkeeping status, but it is not what's driving the whole close. You can do the same thing for tax or any other service that you need to have a status for. This is where I would recommend putting those.
I've also seen some people utilize this when it comes to 1099. So maybe you create a saved view that has just your 1099 clients on it, and then you have a specific status that is specific to those 1099s of have, received all vendors, still waiting on vendors, filed with track 1099, any of those can be created as a custom status. And then you would just select drop down and enter in any kind of statuses that you might want as an option. Yeah, no problem, Kate. That's a really interesting one because it's a workaround. This is not technically a status, but because it's a drop down, like our statuses, we can kind of paint a parallel. Now, the only thing I want to point out is that in these custom statuses, at least right now, unless I'm fibbing and they just did a tiny update, that new custom drop down can't have different color coding. So that may come here in a little bit. But at least at this point, those drop-down options are going to be all the same color instead of that close, which has the different colors. So just wanted to kind of mention that because that is one kind of small detail that changes between those two.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, time went by very quickly today.
I know I got the 3 o'clock warning as we were just rolling along. So feel free, if anybody has a little bit of extra time, has a question that we didn't get to, feel free to stay on. We've got a little bit of time. If you need to hop off, that's totally fine. Totally understand and really excited you were able to join us. We'll be doing our next one the third Wednesday of March, and everybody will get the recording and any resources, especially on like Tyler Autos and some of those that are deeper dives into some of the topics that we scratched the surface on. And for anybody that wants to hop on, feel free to pop a question in if you have anything else that we want to talk about.
Did we miss any questions in there that we need to circle back around to or answer in the follow-up email?
Yeah, let's double check. I think Deb was the only one I had to go back to. Oh, time tracking. Kate, was that what you were going to ask about? I did see your little hand raised. Yep. Okay, cool. Thanks for the reminder there. So yep, time tracking. Let's figure out that exact question. Can I mark some time off or mark completed?
Okay, so it depends on how you're currently using it. I can tell you how I've done it for my bookkeeping firm because I've got one client that I do sometimes I have out of scope work that's billable by the hour. That's separate from her monthly flat rate. So I've started doing something similar so that I know which hours I've invoiced her for and which ones I haven't. The way that I've done it is when I've come in here, I usually, for me, it's like I always use the same status or the same work stream out of scope. And then I enter in what I'm working on and I mark it billable. Once I've billed her for it, I add a note that says invoiced and the date. And I uncheck my billable. So I've got like 2 pieces here to flag myself of, oh, I still need to invoice for that, or no, I've got a note that I've done it. There's no like check boxes or anything like that yet, but that's the workaround that I found for my personal practice. So you could do something similar to that if that's helpful.
I think that's a really interesting workaround for not having, another checkbox or something. Thanks for sharing that, Jody.
Yeah.
That one was new to me too.